In today's Farm Report, now that the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal text is available for review and analysis, various farm groups are doing just that. USDA's Rod Bain reports.
Now for review, the full text of the recently reached Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, found at the U.S. Trade Representative's Office website, www.ustr.gov. And speaking of reviewing, that is what many are doing with TPP, including agricultural entities and organizations. They are breaking down the schedules for tariff reductions for their particular commodities or products in each Trans-Pacific Partnership member nation. For instance, USDA Foreign Agricultural Service Administrator Phil Karsting says analysis is being conducted.
That's part of what our ATAC, our Ag Trade Advisory Committees, will be working on and taking a look at, seeing what it means. These are groups that are appointed by both the Secretary of Agriculture and Ambassador Froman that provide us a great deal of background as we go through these negotiations, technical advice and advisory remarks on the nuts and bolts of these trade agreements.
And American Farm Bureau Federation President Bob Stallman says review of TPP is similar to the structure in place by his organization and used with other trade agreements.
We will take a trade agreement once we have the text. We will do a very detailed economic analysis of the impact across all of agriculture by commodity and then make a decision as to whether we, quote, officially support it or not.
Now, while many commodity groups are also conducting their review and analysis of the specific TPP impacts, they continue to remain strongly in favor of this trade agreement for the perceived benefits their products will gain in new and expanding export markets, expressed through a recent press conference held by some of the nation's major grain and livestock organizations and FAS Administrator Karsting. Chip Bowling of the National Corn Growers Association says, for instance, with his commodity,
today, American exports more than $63 billion of agricultural products to TPP countries, including more than $6 billion in corn and corn co-products. With the Trans-Pacific Partnership, we can do even more.
And Bob McCann of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association says for his industry,
the Trans-Pacific Partnership, we feel, levels the playing field for U.S. beef overseas, providing significant opportunity for our producers.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
You may remember that last winter and spring, avian influenza brought in by migratory birds got into commercial poultry flocks.
We lost a lot of turkeys, approximately 9 to 10 million birds.
Now, you would think that that would cause a problem as far as supplies for this Thanksgiving, but Agriculture Department economist Dave Harvey says we're only talking about a 3% decline in turkey production for this year as a whole. And that's partly because we had a big supply already in cold storage when the year began, and producers sent 7% more turkeys to market in the first 3 months of this year than the same time the year before, partially making up for the cutbacks later on. Recently, at the wholesale level, frozen hen turkeys were selling for about 5.5% more than this time a year ago. But Dave Harvey says supermarkets are willing to offer deep discounts to us to get us into their stores to buy all the other stuff and stuffing for the big meal. For example,
in the Washington area, prices have gone as low as 59 cents a pound.
And in some places now, prices are lower than that. Some stores giving away turkeys with a minimum purchase. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Lower crop prices will likely be with us for at least the next year or so. So how are farmers in the egg sector adjusting? The U.S. Department of Agriculture's Gary Crawford has this.
One analyst says, yes, things have been worse for farmers in the past, much worse, but there's no getting around it.
U.S. producers are facing a difficult time.
The Agriculture Department's chief economist, Rob Johansson, those were his comments after taking a look at the USDA's latest crop supply and demand forecast showing that farmers this next marketing year could see average prices drop from this past season's already low prices, drop for wheat, corn, soybeans, and sorghum.
They may be coming down so far in some cases that farmers aren't meeting their cost of production.
Of course, he says that's not a given for all farmers, but a definite possibility for some. But he says most farmers are apt business people. They will make adjustments. They are making adjustments first.
Producers start digging into their capital reserves, and they also see a reflection in the negotiated land rent values.
And along with that, of course, land values themselves are either not growing or actually falling. Now, that's not an adjustment by farmers, but by the marketplace. But back to farmers and their adjustments. They may be making more trips to the bank over this next year, but not to make deposits.
We would expect to see an increase in loan activity occurring in the banking sector, which I think you can see happening now. If looking at some of the Federal Reserve Bank statistics, you see an increase in loan activity occurring for operating loans.
And we could see possibly more adjustments next spring at planting time.
Marginal production acres, low yield acres, high cost of production acres would likely exit from production if prices remain too low to cover production costs on those acres.
But of course, farmers don't always have to depend totally on the price they get for products. Johansson says, of course, there are some financial safety nets in place.
We do have the new farm bill that's out there, and so farmers that do have revenue insurance programs may be able to cushion the blow a little bit from those insurance products. In addition, the ARC and the PLC programs will likely pay out and help cushion the harder economic times that producers are experiencing in some parts of the country.
And many analysts think that these times of lower farm product prices may last longer than just over the next 12 months. But that outlook could change radically if there are crop production shortfalls that happen either here or in other producing countries. Now, but it's been very unusual. Over the last couple of seasons, we really haven't had those major crop disruptions or supply problems to add that upward pressure on prices. Most unusual. But that situation could change at almost any time. In Washington, Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Coming up this weekend is the annual session of the U.S.-China Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack will join U.S. Trade Representative Michael Froman and Commerce Secretary Penny Pritzker as part of the U.S. delegation in meetings to be held in Guangzhou, China. China has grown in recent years to become our nation's top ag export market, especially in soybeans. As Bob Metz of the U.S. Soybean Export Council explains,
their government would say that we are going to concentrate on rice and corn, and we're going to import soybeans. That's been their government policy, and if you look at their support levels of corn and soybeans and rice, it clearly shows that.
He adds Chinese government policy plans to move rural residents to urban areas over the next 2 decades, with hopes to increase their already growing middle class. And Metz says that means a greater demand for food and more opportunities for U.S. farm exports like soybeans. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.